Hello and welcome to another episode of The Kitchen Hacker. Today I've got some great porterhouse steaks on sale, and that's awesome. I'm going to grill them. We're going to leave it pretty plain, just season it up. But what I do want to make is a nice ragout to go underneath. For this ragout I chose some wild mushrooms. They just were beautiful when I was in the market today. I can use some of the rosemary we discussed earlier in the blog this week, so it just seemed the perfect storm for today's episode. What a ragout is essentially not a gravy as you might think of ragout, R-A-G-U, the way we spell it. Look right here. It's a little different, and it's more of a stew. So what we're going to actually do is we're actually going to stew these mushrooms in their own juices. And mushrooms by nature tend to hold a lot of juice, and we're going to help kind of bring that out, make it a little stewy, and it's going to be very nice. And then of course we're going to flavor that with a little fresh rosemary and some garlic for seasoning. First I want to walk you through some mushrooms real quick. You might be afraid, you always pick the button mushrooms. Maybe you ventured into some of the other ones, but let's get a quick review so that you know what's good and what's not. First things first. These guys here are called oyster mushrooms. Typically they can be found in clusters. You can see that this one here, it's a little soft white. They should be firm to the touch. They shouldn't be mushy, shouldn't be anything like that. We want them nice and firm. We'll show you how to cut these momentarily. We have enoki. These can be, this is a short height. I've seen them very tall as well. Usually used as a garnish, but they're a nice stringy mushroom and they'll look great in our ragout today. We also have the venerable shiitake mushroom. Sorry about my poor accent there, it just kind of happens. This guy's great for flavoring, brings a nice woody flavor. These are also very firm mushrooms and they work great in stews and things like this where you need that texture to kind of hold up and not mush out. Okay. These are creminis, also known as baby bella. They're known as that because they're essentially baby portobello mushrooms is what they're called. I think they resemble more of a white mushroom that happens to have a tan skin. Tend to have a very similar texture and flavor to the white, maybe a little more nutty if I had to really put a fine tooth on it. Great mushrooms to use in place of white mushrooms. Pennsylvania, we're very lucky that we have great mushroom growers around here. Last but not least, portobello. You can see these guys, I've seen them as big as 8 inches around, down to usually about 3 to 4 inches. So these are another great mushroom. They add a lot of meat. You can just grill these guys plain. Don't need a lot of extra going on there. Okay, so now let's really quick talk about how we're going to cut each one of these. All right, so starting with the portobello, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove pretty much the stem. Okay, the stem here is okay, but it doesn't really add a lot of flavor. So I'm going to take about 1 inch, and that'll be good. Also, the bottom of the stems tend to have the dirt still attached to them, which brings me to my next point, and that is when I clean a mushroom, it's one of the few times I won't run it under running water. What I normally do is just take a rag, like a nice rag that I don't really care about because this is all it's going to be used for today, and I just gently brush off the mushroom. Remember, a mushroom acts like a sponge, and it's just going to suck up water if we throw it in a colander and rinse it off. Okay, and that's all fine and good, but the problem is when we actually go to cook this, we want to put our own flavors inside of the mushrooms. That's not going to happen if all that water is sitting there. Not to mention all that water is going to come out in the cooking process, and that's just not fun. All right, the baby bella mushrooms don't require any special preparation. We can just slice them down, just straight across. All right. The portobello mushrooms, I'm just going to make into large slices. One of the tricks is we really want to show off the shapes of the mushrooms in this dish. So you can see here, I'm leaving them all nice and whole. The other thing you'll notice is I tend to cut them all the same size. That's so they all cook at the same time. For me, that's in between about 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch. All right, oyster mushrooms. Basically, we want to remove the bottom knot here, where they all kind of group together, and then you just mow them down. All right, the enoki mushrooms, same thing as the oyster mushrooms, but I'm really not going to be so concerned about chopping them because I really want to leave these guys whole. So this is one of the cases I will just break this apart by hand. Okay, last but not least, the shiitakes. Now these stems are not good eats. It's just, they're nasty, they're woody, they're fibrous. So I really cut these pretty close, and I wouldn't even use these for stock. They just don't bring a lot of life to the party. So as you can see right here, I'm going to cut this guy pretty tight. Again, I'm going to leave just enough of the stem so I get a nice mushroom shape. My same 1/4 inch thickness here. All right, now don't be afraid if that looks like a lot of mushrooms. Mushrooms will cook down quite dramatically, and what we'll see is probably about not even half of that volume by the time we're done. All right, I just want to add some color to my ragu here. So what I did was I just picked up a few peppers. And I'm just going to make a quick 1/4 inch slice out of these guys. Now I'm not going to do too many because I don't want the pepper flavor to overpower what we have going on with all these wonderful wild mushrooms. All right, excellent. We'll set those aside. We're going to have to start the peppers before the mushrooms since they are going to take a little bit longer to cook. And last but not least, we need our garlic. Smack it. Separate the garlic from the coating, paper, skin, whatever you wish to call it. Undesirable pieces of foods. All right, and this I'm just going to give a really rough chop. Again, we're going rustic here with our ragu, so we don't need to be too worried about how large everything is. All right, I'm going to turn my pan on. I'm going to turn that on kind of a high flame. I do want to get this up a little bit so that it'll heat my oil in a minute or two, so then we can start getting our garlic going and everything else. Last thing we're going to do is we're going to add our rosemary. I got a nice stalk of rosemary here. And we want to actually saute our rosemary a little bit with the garlic. Reason for that is it will help the rosemary release some of the oils. And a sauteed herb always has a slightly different flavor than a fresh herb that's either stewed with everything, or conversely, an herb that's just kind of dusted right at the end. So one herb can have 3 different uses and have 3 completely different flavors. For this one, I kind of want a light toasted kind of flavor, and I really want that rosemary oil to seep into my mushrooms. What better way to do that than to make the oil kind of a rosemary garlic oil prior to actually putting the mushrooms in. So it definitely will make a nice flavor. I just wad up my rosemary after picking it off, and I'm just going to cut it down real quick. Nothing fancy. Take out that little bit. We don't want that. There we are. All right, so I have about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. I'm going to put that in my pan and let that heat up. Next, we add in our garlic and our rosemary. All right, so the idea here is we want to perfume the oil, and we just want to get some of the flavor out of the garlic and out of the rosemary. So I'm not going to really toast this very long. Also remember, it's going to continue to cook once we add the things to it. So let's not get carried away here. All right, just as soon as my garlic starts to turn, which it's starting to do now, I'm going to throw in my peppers. Kind of give them a head start. Spread them evenly throughout the pan. Okay, it's been about 30 seconds. You can start to see that it's a good thing I added my peppers when I did, because my garlic is starting to have a little color to it. If I would have toasted my garlic too far, it would be burnt right now. Next, we're going to add our mushrooms. Now, this is one of the few cases where this is going to look like it overloads the pan. Don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. I'm going to back down my heat a little bit. I put a weighted cover on this just for a few minutes. What that's going to do is it's going to steam up the mushrooms inside there, but without burning anything at the same time. What the water is going to do is the water is going to actually kind of steam out, and it's also going to help pull some of those flavors into the mushrooms. Remember, I said mushrooms are sponges. The water is going to carry some of that flavors of all the olive oil and everything else into all the mushrooms. Tell me this doesn't sound good. Okay, so it's been about 2 minutes. Let's take a peek. All right, so we have a little bit of color going on. We can start to already see how far our mushrooms have kind of shrunk as they've reduced down in size. And look at the bottom here, you can start to see the moisture that they're kind of giving off in this process. That's great. That's exactly what we're looking for. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to help the process of adding moisture by sprinkling about 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt on top of that. The salt is going to help to draw some of the moisture out of the mushrooms, but it still allows us to put the flavor in. That is really, I wish you had smell-o-vision, because this smells wonderful. Something about garlic and rosemary. Wow. So now I'm just going to let this sit for about 5 minutes. We're going to let it cook over a low heat. And I just want this to slowly kind of macerate all the flavors and get it all kind of mixed up in there. And then we're going to be ready to plate and serve. Okay, so it's been about 5 minutes that I've let my ragout sit on the stove here over low heat. And we're just sauteing away. And this looks wonderful. All right, last thing. I am just going to plate this up. Put half on this plate. My steak's going to go right on top. And then we are going to be done. So that's it. Mushroom ragout in a nutshell. What a great vegetable to add to a dish like this. It really has a lot of flavor, that nice pungent rosemary going with the garlic, the fresh olive oil, and of course, the 5 mushrooms are the star of this dish. So make sure to give it a try, and the next time you're grilling this steak, put away the white mushrooms, go for the wild side.